Prashanth Ramakrishna, and I'm 15 years old, and today I'm going to be speaking on catalyzing the sustainability revolution. Human beings only change, only overcome, only evolve when standing at the precipice of disaster, off balance and facing the almost inevitable fate of falling. We only change when we have everything to lose, when we are overloaded and forced to work through the night, or when the exploding oxygen tank cripples the Apollo 13, putting lives in danger. We only change out of necessity, when circumstances force us to, when we're threatened by the catastrophe. So this begs the question, what if we don't rise to the occasion? What if we aren't able to steady ourselves and regain our balance? What if the unthinkable happens and we fall? It's bound to happen, isn't it? We will be too late. Our problem-solving, innovative nature that we so condescendingly use to manipulate our surroundings, other species, and ultimately various situations will fail us. I know what you're thinking. What can a 15-year-old possibly know about human nature? But it's a simple observation, isn't it? I mean, it takes the detonation of a nuclear bomb for us to realize that we have to avoid atomic warfare at all costs. That this power cannot be used rationally, or rather, should not be used at all. But me being me, I can't just settle for observation. Why do we, as a civilization, require such extreme situations to change our behavior and evolve our thinking? I found that the most relevant and holistic answers are embedded in the recent and ongoing revolutions that have swept our world in the past half-century. But before I go too deep into this, while you ponder these questions, I should probably introduce myself, since I didn't do that at the beginning of the talk. I'm no doubt a third culture kid. I was born in the suburbs of Detroit, and while I did spend a lot of my childhood there, most of my life has been spent globetrotting. To date, I have lived in the USA, Canada, Belgium, Germany, the UK, and now for my high school years, I'm living in Shanghai, China. So while I can understand and relate to a multitude of cultural mindsets, I can't deny that I have been shielded. I've never had to experience destitution or social injustice. In fact, the very reason that I'm exposed so much to the world and its various opportunities is because of a privileged upbringing. I guess in some ways you could say that I'm a bit of a limousine liberal, but I'm fine with that. So this is me in my more unruly days. As you can see, I didn't exactly appreciate order or structure. I expressed these sentiments in my early childhood through mostly facial distortion and probably some arm flinging. But even now, as only just a 15-year-old, and despite my extensive efforts to separate myself from the system, I've realized that there is no escaping institution. I go to school for 8 hours a day, we go to school for 8 hours a day, where we are expected to abide by a standardized curriculum, follow an everyday repetitive schedule, and accept disciplinary measures from administrators we might not even know. And then I go home and I read about large multinational corporations, bilateral financial agencies, and corrupt banking systems that monopolize our global economy, its assets, and a majority of our natural resources. And I even live in a country where government restriction has forced the removal of all international social media and the dissemination of any large gathering, peaceful or not. I saw myself as a lone rebel against the world, Prashanth Ramakrishna versus everyone and everything. But it's easy when you're alone. And then I thought, what if I wasn't? What if it was an entire country that felt this way? What if it was the whole global community? What does it take to really start a revolution? So, luckily for me, like I said, there has been an abundance of revolutions that have swept our world in the past half-century. And as I spent time trying to answer this question of revolution, I came across an interesting pattern, a revolutionary cycle, if you will. All revolutions start with the need or necessity for institution. I mean, institutions bring order to chaos. They play a significant role in socioeconomic stability. But over time, these institutions become unnecessarily bureaucratic, corrupt even. They become restrictive, oppressive. And despite a degrading standard of living, economy, and moral state, the citizenry remains passive, except for maybe a few isolated events here or there. During this time, the revolutionary region, if you will, exists in separate silos or disconnected groups. It's only when a catalyst is introduced that these groups, these silos, are forced to unite in a revolution. It's only when this catalyst comes into play that power is stripped from governments by a network so massive that it can take on any institution, anywhere. A catalyst has no name. It has no recognizable features for that matter. It can take any form. It can be an event, a person, a piece of information, a whisper. It can be any of these things and more. History has seen this pattern over and over and over again. So this is Muhammad Suharto, the second president of Indonesia. He rose to power and was appointed president in 1968, following the Indonesian independence. And during this time, prior to being president, Suharto served as Indonesia's major general. And now, in this time, being a newly independent country, Indonesia was extremely fragile, volatile even. Indonesia needed a strong government that would maintain stability in the archipelago. And Suharto's regime did just that. So while he and his administration were popular in the 70s and 80s, this militaristic style of government soon became restrictive. And people were definitely not any happier when the Asian financial crisis of 1997 swept over Indonesia at around the same time. So even though Suharto was losing a lot of support, his regime was still very much in place, and he remained in power. However, it was well known that public happiness was at an all-time low. And while these sentiments were displayed in a few disconnected rebellions, Suharto's office was not threatened until the Trisakti shootings, the catalyst in the movement to overthrow Suharto. While Suharto was on a diplomatic trip to Cairo, Indonesian forces opened fire on a group of unarmed protesters at the Trisakti University in Jakarta who were demanding Suharto's resignation. These are the names of the 4 students that were murdered in the shootings. Within 3 days, over 10,000 gathered to march on the Parliament building. Within a week, riots had broken out all over Indonesia, and 1 week after the riots began, Suharto officially resigned from presidency. This is Ferdinand Marcos, the former president of the Philippines. Marcos was in power from the mid-60s till the mid-80s. And during this time, he implemented wide-ranging programs of infrastructure development and economic reform. But his entire time in office was tainted by massive corruption, political repression, and human rights violations. Every political figure has an opponent. Marcos had several. Benigno Aquino was Marcos's largest political adversary at the time. So you can imagine when Aquino was shot in the head at the Manila airport, why the entire country would immediately suspect Marcos. Aquino consistently spoke out against Marcos' dictatorial rule. But in this particular case, Aquino's death was not the catalyst. It was the dissemination of this information that Marcos played a hand in Aquino's death. For most, this was the last straw. Aquino's death catapulted an otherwise disconnected group of events into a nationally unified crusade. It thrust Aquino's now widow into the national spotlight as a presidential candidate, and and unveiled countless allegations of money laundering and embezzlement against Marcos. These allegations, coupled with a newfound hope found in Corazon Aquino, fueled the People's Power Revolution that forced Marcos out of the country and into resignation. So, the last example that I want to take a look at is the Indian independence movement, of course. And I'm sure that all of you, now most of you, are extremely familiar with the independence movement. So, I guess then I'll get straight to it. The catalyst in the independence movement was, without a doubt, the massacre at Amritsar. Before the massacre, the movement was reserved for the elite. It was removed from the masses. This event, so terrible, so horrific, it woke the Indian public up to the universal understanding that they needed to take their country back. Immediately after the massacre, we see this stupendous acceleration in the movement. And right after, immediately in 1920, we see the first non-cooperation movement, where the entire country comes together and boycotts British goods. They refuse to pay taxes, and essentially they demand their freedom. This later culminated in 10 years in Salt March and in the eventual independence of India. So, right now, I'm reading this book, A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And before he launches into his somewhat lunatic story, he makes a few very interesting points. He says that all governments are bound for totalitarianism. He says that only a large-scale popular movement towards decentralization and self-help will arrest the current tendency towards statism. He also says that he also notes later on that no movement at present. I mean, the book was published in 1932, but at present there's no movement, no sign of any movement that like this that will take place. Okay, so this is interesting because I completely disagree with him. All governments are bound for democracy, the government of the people. I mean, isn't this exactly what we see? When governments shift towards dictatorial rule and oppressive totalitarianism, the people, incited by a catalyst, revolt. When governments gain too much power, the people are there to dethrone it. It's almost like an extremely distorted system of checks and balances. I'm saying this because right now, the world is at the verge or in the midst of perhaps the largest revolution it's ever seen, the global revolution. Rather than demanding democracy, freedom, or good governance, this revolution fights for a sustainable future, the sustainability revolution. Right now, the sustainability revolution is being led, not so successfully I might add, by governments and multinational corporations. The problem with this is that they're all talk and no action. At this level, they're only looking out for their interests, their own corporate or national interests. And to a point, this is extremely unproductive. I mean, we sorely need a catalyst that will shift power back to the people, to a united global front. In the summer of 2012, I started a nonprofit organization called Unheard Voices, and it empowers to fight for a sustainable future. Unheard Voices is trying to catalyze the sustainability revolution. It's trying to create lasting change through understanding. And because of this, most of our programs are geared towards creating this global understanding that sustainability is so much more than just environmental stability. We believe that understanding will bring about this change, will be this catalyst. So we have a program. It's called it's an online publication actually called Peace Perspective, and we pioneer a new approach to conflict journalism. in which we report on all key relevant perspectives to any event through emotionally raw interviews and undisputed facts. Currently, we have over 60 correspondents in 8 different countries reporting on 3 different conflict zones, and we're growing every single day. We also have a program called the Bottle Up Initiative. I started the Bottle Up Initiative in 2011 with a few friends of mine, and we built a saleable catamaran out of completely recycled materials, including over 1,000 plastic bottles. We sailed down the Detroit River with the hope of raising awareness about plastic pollution. And now I've resurrected this program to fight plastic pollution through legislation, something that India has recently taken up with their bag tax. So another program fighting plastic pollution is Awareness Times 10. We've created a plastic pollution awareness presentation template, and every month we encourage 10 presentations to be given. We tell our people that it doesn't matter where you are, who you're speaking to, it doesn't matter how many people are in your audience, it doesn't matter what the formality of the presentation is. Awareness is awareness, understanding is understanding. So through our various programs, through what we stand for, through our mission, Unheard Voices is trying to catalyze the sustainability revolution. I recently wrote a piece for the Huffington Post. It's called Why the Millennial Generation Needs to Redefine Sustainability. And I sent it along to my cousin for some feedback, and I'll never forget the email response that I got back. He said, I really don't find it interesting. I don't care about big concepts with vague definitions covering a range of things, and sustainability is one of them. The general stuff is for academics and essayists who never get anything done. So it's easy for me to stand here and speak intelligently. It's easy for me to write an article about broad concepts with vague definitions covering a range of things. It's easy to be an academic or an essayist. It's not easy to catalyze a sustainability revolution. Thank you, I'm Prashanth Ramakrishna.